Just think about it. Obesity contributes to 13% of all cancer cases globally.
You train for the threats you can see, but what about the ones you can't? United Diagnostic Services brings hospital grade diagnostic technology directly to first responder agencies, making early detection of cardiovascular disease and cancer more accessible than ever. UDS provides comprehensive early detection programs using advanced ultrasound, CT calcium scoring, stress echoes, and innovative blood panels to identify potential health risks long before symptoms appear. It's proactive, on site, and built specifically for those who serve. Early detection saves lives and careers. Learn more at udshealth.com. The views and opinions expressed by the host and guests of this show do not represent their employing agency, department, or organization. All information should be regarded as anecdotal, contextual, and educational, and should not be misinterpreted as legal or medical advice. Welcome to Blue Grit Radio, the podcast that explores making better cops for a better community. I'm your host, Eric Tung. I've been an active police officer since 2007. We will dive into the aspects of police culture, health and wellness, leadership, and mindset. You'll hear from experts not only from policing, but all industries as they relate to being our best with purpose, passion, and positivity. Join me as we share stories, lessons, and advice so we can all be better for ourselves, our teams, our families, and our communities. We often talk about all the threats that we train for, all the threats that we can see in the day-to-day job, whether you're in policing, whether you're in firefighting or EMS. What we don't talk about quite enough are the hidden threats, the threats that are within us. And I'm talking about actual physical, physiological stress and health implications there. And so to talk about that, what lies beneath the surface, I'm excited to welcome Ray Lankin from United Diagnostic Services. Ray, thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Eric, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So we're going to get into some of the really jarring data, some points that people have heard and some that I'm sure people haven't. But when we're talking about these health markers, I would just like you to please introduce yourself, your company, and what brought you into this conversation in this space.
Absolutely. My name is Ray Lankin. I'm the founder and CEO of United Diagnostic Services. I dedicated all my life to diagnostic tests because I lost my mom to cancer when she was only 26 years old. Unfortunately, she was misdiagnosed, and by the time physicians discovered cancer, it was already too late for her. So I graduated and started my first company back in 2001. And first 16 years, we were focused on deploying gold standard diagnostic technology into Ivy League hospital networks around the country. And around 2017 is that where we started working with law enforcement officers and overall first responders. And what triggers that was the hospital networks that we operated. We started detecting cancer and cardiovascular disease at a very high rate. Back then, we looked at the occupation and realized we were working with first responders that responded to 9/11. As you know, out of 16,000 men and women that responded, over 3,000 were later diagnosed with different forms of cancer and cardiovascular disease. So for our medical team, that triggered extensive research. We quickly realized that the problem with cancer and cardiovascular disease is true for every first responder in our country. And we've developed and put together a very comprehensive program utilizing gold standard diagnostic technology and making them available, accessible, affordable by mobilizing them on site to every agency or fire station.
Yeah, that's super jarring. People hear cancer, they hear cardiovascular disease, they know that can absolutely be a life changer or a life ender. And there's more and more information out there that a lot of the, we'll say, lifestyle contributors or career style contributors are carcinogenic, right? They are cancer causing in nature, and one of them being shift work and sleep deprivation. And then a lot of first responders recognize with that the shift work comes these things. It's more difficult to get in the proper nutrition. It's more difficult to get in the proper exercise with those stressors. Could you share some of the other data that you have that really should ring the alarm bells for those that hear this and they're like, yeah, that's just that's part of life. That's part of the job.
When we look at the data, I think, we have to rely on Ivy League organizations that collect data data through the year and then make it available to us through educational narrative beginning of every year. What's alarming is American Heart Association just came up with educational narrative saying that 48.9% of American adults over age of 20 have cardiovascular disease. American Cancer Society came up with another educational narrative saying that over 2 million people will be diagnosed with cancer in 2026. And of course, we know that first responders is just in a higher risk compared to general population.
Yeah, that's super jarring. And one of the data points that you shared before is similar to what a lot of people have heard, which is a good thing. That there's an awareness, but I don't think there's quite the awareness and led to action that we need. And that is average heart attack age, general population around 65. And for first responders, law enforcement, policing specific, 49, right? So we're not even hitting that quote unquote midlife, right? If we target 50, and that's when we're having this increased incident.
It's very staggering, Eric. It's very staggering. If you're looking further, law enforcement officers have 56% increase of dying from heart attack between age 59, 55, and 59. And of course, we can't disregard all the occupational health risks, including stress. You mentioned shift work. You mentioned sleep deprivation, but also some numbers that we have to look at is that law enforcement officers in 60% higher risk of developing coronary artery disease. 33% higher risk of developing diabetes. 25% of all law enforcement officers in our country is dealing with abnormal blood pressure, and 40% is dealing with obesity. And when you have this metabolic syndrome symptoms and symptoms of coronary artery disease, you're high risk for sudden heart attacks, for catastrophic events compared to general population.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know many police officers through the years, many that are very health oriented and they're like, okay, I'm aware, I'm doing the preventive things I need. But there's also people that are aware and the data is so jarring and it sounds so insurmountable to start adopting all the things that they think are preventative. But one thing that really sticks out to me is having someone, a coworker of one of my close friends, was a very healthy individual, that kind of active guy that would run multiple miles a day. And it wasn't until getting a scan of this nature that it revealed a,
Potential catastrophic pathology that was completely asymptomatic.
yeah, so you could have someone quote unquote doing all the right things, getting their annual physical. Could you talk a little bit more on that and why that is not going to be detected in conventional routine checkups?
Our legacy medical system is great. We call it Medicine 2.0. We can't disregard all of the diagnostic tools and all the evaluation that Medicine 2.0 system has implemented to detect cardiovascular disease and cancer, right? We did really well with implementing some of the risk diagnostic tool. However, this legacy risk factors have a lot of blind spot, unfortunately. I mean, cardiovascular disease and law enforcement officers are usually evaluated through total cholesterol, abnormal blood pressure, family history, diabetes, abnormal blood pressure, etc. Unfortunately, cardiovascular disease is multifactorial, and it has a lot of the legacy medical system evaluation has a lot of blind spot because yeah, there's not one test that can detect cardiovascular disease. You have to look at structure, you have to look at function, you have to look at flag, you have to look at dilation, aneurysm, inflammation, genetics. All these factors come in place in order to detect catastrophic pathology that has to do with cardiovascular disease in the early stage.
Yeah. Yeah, and so that is a lot, right? And even if you have a pretty good, a pretty responsible clinician, it doesn't go into all of that until there is a symptom. But as you said, a lot of these catastrophic events or pending catastrophic events don't show the symptoms outside of your scans. So, can you walk us through a little bit of what your scans and what the medical technology being utilized looks like?
Absolutely. Again, going back to what we started our conversation with, all my experience is hospital based. So we basically mobilizing gold standard diagnostic technology that we use in the hospital for symptomatic population. Right. Our goal is to make them available on site by delivering it right in the comfort of the agency or a firehouse, and make it accessible, available, and affordable. But since cardiovascular disease is multifactorial, we have multiple diagnostic tools that we mobilize for that, right? So our gold standard diagnostic program, 9 organ body part ultrasound, that I think your department has experienced before, right? It consists of us screening 9 organs and body parts. We take a look at 4 different body systems that includes full cardiovascular evaluation and evaluation of all the vital organs, all the solid and hollow organs together. As far as cardiovascular evaluation, and we have multiple programs. Again, what we need to the underlying message here is that cardiovascular disease is multifactorial. There's not one test that can detect a cardiovascular disease. It's like if you just applying one test. What's a good analogy here? It's like a working a police case with only one clue, right? You're gonna miss the real suspect, right? Same thing applies to cardiovascular disease. There's multiple diagnostic tools that you have to apply. What's available in the full body ultrasound is full echocardiogram, where we look at any heart function abnormalities, valve disease, heart function, bone motion, and pathologies like low ejection fraction, left ventricle dilation, etc. What's also included is evaluating all your vascular system. So we'll look for plaque in the carotid artery. We'll also look at aneurysm in ascending aorta and aneurysm in abdominal aorta as well. And from there, we evaluate all the solid and hollow organs for general pathologies, but we are focused on detecting early signs of cancer as well.
Yeah. It was a very seamless process as far as getting the ultrasound scans. A couple things I'll note. You basically just have to hydrate and be fasted, and the rest is pretty straightforward, right? It doesn't take super long. And so, in just like the layman's terms, you lay there and you get all your major organs scanned. The follow up points I really want to feature are that there was a member that wasn't able to get it signed up initially, and he was very intrigued. He believed in the technology. He wanted to get this preventative service done. And so he went about just trying to reach out to his primary care and network to find how he could do that, essentially pay out of pocket a la carte. He wasn't able to find it. But then, as I spoke before, having a colleague of a friend before I even learned about more about these services of being a critical lifesaver. But also, I know people that have benefited from this service that found something extremely concerning where they were able to have follow up medical intervention right away. And so the legitimacy is there. And that's where I'm very excited just to be able to feature this conversation, and it's relatively low hanging fruit. I think for a lot of people listening in so far will think, if they're not familiar, that it's going to be an extremely expensive service. So can you talk about the money there? Because when we talk about wellness, different programs, different features and benefits and tools, I do regard this to be one of the cheaper things that you can give your people per employee.
Absolutely. So, number one goal is to make it affordable. Make it affordable even if the department or agency can make it a budgetary item, individuals can pay out of pocket, or more importantly, use their HSA and FSA cards. We're a national provider, and our services embedded in a lot in Blue Cross Blue Shield. Third party administrator in a lot of states, and we're a national provider and HSA and FSA. So it's only $360 a person. And that includes setup and delivery, professional interpretation, telemedicine consultation, which is, I think, one of the most important features of this whole service line, and, you know, setup and delivery on site. The value proposition here is we're delivering about $4,000 worth of diagnostic tests on site for first responders for only $360 a person. And this is only one of our programs. We also mobilize 64 slice CT unit to perform a coronary artery test called calcium scoring. We also have a stress echo test that evaluates heart performance under stress. We also have innovative blood panels that we do for law enforcement officers like ApoB, lipoprotein little a, and LP play 2, all help us to detect either cardiovascular, coronary artery disease, or just individuals that at the high risk of infant stage of beginning of cardiovascular disease. And this actually where we want to detect most of the people, because then you have time for immediate behavior modification, lipid management, etc. You mitigate your risk for catastrophic event in the future.
Yeah, and you went through a lot of that really quick. I just went through a wellness presentation where the speaker talked about a lot of these items, and there's a lot of very health minded folks in the room, including myself. Like, I kind of nerd out on these things, but I wasn't familiar with all of them, and I could not explain it like a fifth grader to a fifth grader. So, do you mind slowing down and going back through each of those different things that United Diagnostic Services offers?
Absolutely. So again, we're going back to the one main common denominator that cardiovascular disease is multifactorial, right?
Hmm.
So with echocardiogram and the ultrasound, you can look at heart function abnormality. Through a carotid Doppler, you can look at carotid artery plaque buildup or early signs of inflammation. Through echocardiogram, you also can evaluate ascending aorta dilation. By the way, Eric, very common pathology for law enforcement officers because of the stress, because of the abnormal blood pressure. Very asymptomatic until it's too late. With abdominal aorta evaluation called AAA, you might have heard of it or you've been through it. You can evaluate aneurysm in abdominal aorta. So now we're moving on to coronary artery disease, right? What tools we have to actually detect coronary artery disease, right? The widowmaker, that this very small branch of arteries that lay on the surface of the heart and doesn't take too long for plaque to penetrate into endothelium space of the artery, oxidize, create plaque, and individuals have been asymptomatic until it's too late, right? Have catastrophic event without any symptoms. We have couple tools for that. Let's say we want to implement a comprehensive blood panel, innovative blood biomarkers. ApoB is looking at all bad acting cholesterol particles floating through your bloodstream, penetrating into your artery. Our legacy medical system looks only at LDL, how much cholesterol you have inside of your LDL. ApoB protein reps up all of the bad acting particles, not only LDL, but LDL, VLDL, ILDL, right? Helps us to understand how many of those very bad acting cholesterol particles we have in our bloodstream. Lipoprotein little a also, not a good cholesterol particle, it's genetic. 50% of the population have it. Your genes tell your liver to make this particle. Your LDL can be normal, everything else can be normal, but you have lipoprotein little a, this little atherogenic particles that's penetrating your artery, oxidizing, creating plaque. So we test for that. LP-PLA2, it shows the inflammation in your arterial system, shows the infant stage of the plaque formation, right? So with this innovative blood panel, we can detect individuals maybe in the infant stage of developing cardiovascular disease, right? What do we do from there? Telemedicine consultation in place. We explain the findings, make sure individuals are follow up with their physician with professional report, make sure they're educated on their health status, make sure we stress that from here on, behavior modification is very, very important to make sure we mitigate the risk for catastrophic pathologies, but catastrophic events in the future.
Yeah.
And then finally, calcium scoring test, right? You heard about calcium scoring test. It's a
Mhm.
64 slice CT unit that we deliver on site. Here, we can actually look inside of the coronary artery and detect a plaque buildup in the very, very early stage. Okay. Instead of looking for the cholesterol particles, here we're looking at the artery where the damage already is done.
Mhm.
Cholesterol is already in there. Can be a lot of cholesterol, can be not so much cholesterol, but we want to see if the damage to the artery is done. Okay. This test is not black and white. All biology, Eric, is not black and white. Meaning, if you're asymptomatic after the test, that doesn't mean you're off the hook. Okay, you got to be still very mindful, still testing yourself every 2 to 3 years. Coronary artery test is a 50% not specific and sensitive, meaning you can be asymptomatic because you have a soft plaque building up in your coronary artery, right? It's not hardened yet, it's not detected on the CAT scan. Stress echocardiogram is a final test we do for coronary artery. Is a lot more comprehensive test just doing the stress test. You're also putting individual through the stress, meaning a full bruise protocol in place, but you take echocardiogram images right after the
Mhm.
stress test to actually see if there's any wall motion abnormality and therefore existing blockages on the test. So stress echo can detect already existing blockages, just like a stress test is just a lot more comprehensive study. Calcium scoring can detect a plaque formation in the coronary artery. and the blood test can detect the high risk individuals that might be just starting developing coronary artery or cardiovascular disease.
Yeah, that's a lot. Thank you for walking back through that and breaking it all down. And I think you're really painting the picture when you said the metaphor earlier of doing one scan or doing one method of checking might provide one clue, which is not going to close the case. It's not going to even get you close to probable cause. Your supervisor's going to throw that thing out. You got to release the person, right? That's not a good arrest. So when you talk about all these intersecting, kind of overlapping scans, that is where you get a better sense of what's actually happening, right? That's how you quote unquote build a case that's probably going to be a slam dunk ending in a conviction, right? To carry on in that metaphor.
Absolutely. And it starts with echocardiogram always. You look at heart function abnormalities, which is, very common pathologies for law enforcement officers, and you take it from there. What we want to establish is a great relationship with the agency where year after year they can use different diagnostic modalities, right? To make sure that, we give law enforcement officers a complete diagnostic testing to detect cardiovascular disease, coronary artery disease, and cancer in there.
And that's fantastic. And I'm hearing about more and more agencies that are making this part of their regular routine. Maybe it's every year, maybe it's every couple of years. Fire departments, as we all know, are generally ahead of the curve in normalizing this and building this into budget and function. But there are grant opportunities out there to work with a company such as yours. One of the things that was really appealing to me also from a wellness coordination and I suppose advocacy perspective is myself and a lot of my colleagues in the region, we're always looking for different speakers, different clinicians, different tools, and different resources, right? Different programs to try to reach people from different angles. And it was apparent to me anecdotally when the invitation went out to participate in this thing, it spanned all age groups, it spanned all divisions, it spanned all perceived activity levels. You know, you had the kind of fit freaks that work out in the gym every day and they're getting after it, eating clean. You also have the people that very self-admittedly like, yeah, I've let myself go. I need to get back into it. But I think that my main point is just that when you present something like this, it is really something where it attracts a lot of people because they can see the legitimacy. They can get to the buy-in a lot more tangibly because a lot of people do really respect the data and it is something that they can't just readily access on their own.
Absolutely. We're dealing with data that is very staggering. 2,300 individuals in the United States die daily from cardiovascular disease and coronary artery disease. So we see the blind spots in our legacy medical system. And unfortunately, diagnostic tools are used only for symptomatic population. What we utilize, and some other colleagues, some other companies in this space, is we are mobilizing gold standard diagnostic technology, traditional diagnostic tools on site, and screening asymptomatic population for possible pathologies. And that's why, in the last 2 years, we prevented over 700 heart attacks and strokes in both fire and police. And just in the last 18 months, detected over 120 cases of cancer at the early stage.
Oh, that's fantastic. And I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I will share what a lot of myself and my colleagues perceive with scans like this. And the reason why generally these tests aren't done until there's symptoms, it appears to be the medical system, right? I've had many friends and colleagues share that they're trying to get blood work, but they don't get the specific blood panels that you might have spoken to, like some of the big ones, right? And so it does appear from my perspective that a lot of times that might be dependent on the clinic and the clinician. A lot of times it might be dependent on the insurance and how much your clinician is going to try to advocate for you through the insurance. Do you have perspectives on that? Because you've worked with so many agencies and individuals from all across the nation.
Physicians definitely are getting more educated on, occupational health risks. A lot of companies that deploy these services to law enforcement officers and fire coming up with aggregate data that is eye-opening and staggering. Our legacy medical system is, has regular checks, checks in place where they do, what's recommended. And I think these recommendations are started to also A lot of organizations start to add on some of this additional testing that you were, that you're describing. But our legacy medical system does a good job of treating virus or accumulable disease, right? You come with the infection, they'll give you antibiotics, send you on your way, right? You have a trauma, they come in, they'll patch you up, you're all set. And we really strive in accumulable disease and trauma, right? I mean, best medical system in the world. However, when it comes to our next step is chronic disease. Next step is understanding cancer, cardiovascular disease, applying more diagnostic preventive tools into this, right? And make sure that we can start testing individuals way before the catastrophic event takes place.
Yeah, and I think you said it there. I've heard many experts and medical professionals describe it as really good sick care, but not necessarily the best preventative health care, right? We're very reactive. If I have blunt force trauma to my arm, there's probably no place I'd rather be than, our medical system to potentially save my arm, right? And potentially save my life. However, I think that there's a great metaphor in this because with policing, with firefighting, you don't want to just be around after the fact, right? Just to mitigate the damages. There are crime prevention efforts you can take on. There are fire prevention efforts and fire marshals and community classes, things that to actually prevent the fact that there could be a large scale fire in an apartment complex because you do the checks on the alarms and you educate folks and you make sure the systems are in place. So I feel like there's a very tangible insight that a lot of times we just don't pay attention to, or we don't give it the respect it's due for our own physical health, our own bodies.
I agree with you. Eric, I'm going to add on to this. Not a lot of folks realize that obesity is the second largest risk factor for cancer after smoking. Just think about it. Obesity contributes to 13% of all cancer cases globally. If you look at American Cancer Society, they report that 1 in 5 cancer causes are due to excess body weight, poor nutrition, physical inactivity, and excessive alcohol consumption. So when we talking about preventing cancer, right, and cardiovascular disease, it starts with us, right? We need to make sure that we address all the metabolic syndromes, and that starts with fatty liver, obesity, high blood pressure, high cholesterol. We have to make sure that we engage with physical activity daily. 1 hour in the gym reduces all-cause mortality by 30 or 40%. Depends on the source that
Hmm.
you're reading from, but the statistics are there. So, and all of these things are free. You don't have to pay for them, right? You don't have
Yeah,
to go to your doctor. And unfortunately, when you go to your doctor, they will not prescribe any physician modification program for you. They're not going to tell you to run 5 times a week or lift weights, right?
they should. They certainly should.
Well, exactly. So, with fire, of course, we focus on detecting cancer. Cardiovascular disease is the second biggest problem in the fire because of the carcinogens exposure. Their cancer screening starts with decon, Eric. That's a first step to prevent cancer is decon, right? And so many different fire chiefs and union leaders told me that. So it starts with us. It starts with us 100%. All the diagnostic tools in the world, you can apply, but, behavior modification, things that we can apply to mitigate the risk, it starts with us and it's free of charge.
Yeah. And I love that. And I think that that's what I value in this conversation. It gives people a lot to think about whether or not they can get, UDS to their agency this year. Don't know, but there's a lot of things that you hear in here that you recognize you can take advantage of, right? We can find doctors that are more clearly advocates for our health and they do get into some of the lifestyle choices. At the same time, if you are able to bring on a company UDS here, then you know that you're going to have that follow up of things to think about. It's not just, hey, here's some really alarming data, but here's some follow up and things to think about what you can do about it.
Yeah, obviously, we get a lot of testimonies. Individuals are reaching out to us to thank us for saving their lives from both police and fire. We meet folks, at the conferences, conventions, caucuses. But the best thing is when you meet individuals and he goes, "Hey Ray, do you recognize me?" And I'm like, "No, I'm sorry, I don't recognize you." And they go, "Yeah, it's because you guys diagnosed fatty liver in me, and I just lost 100 pounds."
My
Right?
gosh.
So that's that's where prevention takes place, right? This is where individuals, even though with a very low hanging fruit like fatty liver, which is a lot of times disregarded, but it's a red flag. It's a
Hmm.
It's a chronic inflammation that's already happening in your body, inducing the normal cells, let's say, to become cancers or putting individuals in a higher risk for cardiovascular disease. A lot of times it's disregarded, but that's a case when individuals took it seriously, implemented behavior modification, and completely reversed their health status.
Yeah, and that's huge. And a couple things from that note, it makes me think of people I personally know that have said, "Yeah, I know I should do XYZ, but my doctor said I'm fine." And I'm like, "Oh man, you just said it. You just said you're overweight. You just said that your family has a history of heart disease, but you don't have that motivator of someone giving you that intrinsic data, right?" That's one thought. And the other one being fatty liver disease. I've heard many accounts where it doesn't mean you're, visually obese or overweight. You could be very thin with fatty liver disease, right? And this is
Non-alcoholic, yeah, non-alcoholic
yes,
fatty disease, a huge contributor to
absolutely.
chronic disease, both cardiovascular and cancer.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, Ray, you've given us a lot to think about. I would love if you could kind of help us summarize. So, what are the big things that you would like those listening in, whether they're first responders or whether they're, family members of first responders or just general population that'd like to listen to the show? What are the things that you would really urge them to think about and consider for their own health?
Staggering statistics are coming out from Ivy League organization like American Heart Association, American Cancer Society. We can't disregard them. Cardiovascular disease is the number one cause of mortality in the United States. It takes 2,300 individuals daily. There are 2 million cancers that folks will be diagnosed with in 2026. Law enforcement officers and firefighters are a high risk compared to general population. Early detection starts with us implementing behavior modification. Implementing healthy lifestyle and physical activity is the first step to mitigate risk for cancer and cardiovascular disease. But then to go further, the only weapon against cardiovascular disease and cancer that we have is aggressive early detection. Because if we can mobilize these diagnostic services on site and detect these pathologies early, the chance of survival for individual goes all the way to 95%. And that survival rate will drop significantly if by the time individuals diagnosed, they're already in stage 4 disease progression. So that's my underlying message to everyone.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Ray. Can you please share with the listeners where they can find out more about UDS and how they can reach out?
Sure, everyone who's interested can visit us at udshealth.com.
Thank you so much, Ray. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure, Eric.
Thank you for tuning into another episode of Blue Grit Radio. As always, support this community by subscribing, giving us a 5-star review, and following, liking, and sharing posts on Blue Grit Wellness on Instagram. You can reach me there or email me at bluegritwellness@gmail.com. Be well and stay gritty.